Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the Seasonal Tourist Business Designation Program. My name is Lynn McDonough-Hughes with Tyans, and I'm pleased to introduce this session. We respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, which is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship. We are all treaty people. Our session today is focused on eligibility for the Seasonal Tourist Business Designation Program and the application process. Joining us from Property Valuation Services Corporation are Ali Crawley, Communications Advisor, Charlene McNeil, Director of Assessment, and Laura McLean, Senior Commercial Assessor. So welcome, everyone, and I will pass it on to the three of you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I'm going to start off for PVSC. So thank you and for having us today. Today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about the Seasonal Tourist Business Designation and the specifics, as well as provide an introduction to Property Valuation Services Corporation, which we shortened to PVSC. So we're going to go through a little bit in terms of what we do as an organization, as well as what we don't do, just to clear up any potential confusion. And then we'll launch into the purpose of today, which is to dive into the details on the Seasonal Tourist Business Designation Program. At the end of the session, we'll have question and answer, and I understand we already have a couple of questions available to answer, so that's great. And if you have any others that come up along the presentation, feel free to ask at that. So just starting with an introduction to PVSC, for those of you that may or may not be aware, our organization is an independent, not-for-profit organization, and we're governed by a board of directors. And on that board actually includes both municipal officials with experience, of course, in municipal relations, as well as independent members and the CEO of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, and as a non-voting member. And all of this is set out in what we call the Property Valuation Services Corporation Act, which governs our organization. We are municipally funded in terms of how our organization is run. And as mentioned, we were created by the Property Valuation Services Corporation Act. Our mandate is to provide property assessment services under the Nova Scotia Assessment Act, and that includes the annual assessment bill. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we do and what we don't do, so as I mentioned, we do deliver an assessment role as part of our main mandate, and that goes to all 49 municipalities by December 31st of each year. And some of you may recall seeing your assessment notice in January of each year if you're a property owner. Of that, we are within that assessment role and those assessment notices is approximately 647,000 individual assessment notices that get delivered each January. But that number does fluctuate a little bit year over year. So that's the approximate current count. Interestingly, out of that 647,000, about 450 properties are what we consider hospitality properties that would be potentially subject to the Seasonal Tourist Business Designation. So that would be things like hotels, motels, campgrounds, and resorts, as well as country inns and guest houses. In addition, and we'll get into this in more detail later, the designation also includes restaurant properties. But that's not, I didn't separate that count out just because there's far more than 450 restaurants in the province. So two of the programs that PVSC administers, the first one is the CAPT assessment program that you may be familiar with. And the second is why we're here today, the Seasonal Tourist Business Designation Program. And these are both administered by PVSC on behalf of the Nova Scotia provincial government. I just want to touch briefly as well in terms of what we don't do, just as there can be confusion. So the things that we do not do and don't have the authority to do are setting tax rates, collecting taxes, creating tax policy, or providing tax relief. So those are completely not under the purview of PVSC and not tasks that we do. And now I'm going to pass you over to Charlene, and she's going to get into the details of the seasonal tourist business designation. So Charlene McNeil, our Director of Assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and good afternoon, everybody. So the next slide here is what does the seasonal tourist business designation provide? And under the legislation, it allows designated participants to receive a 25% tax reduction on property, parts of their property or commercial business that are adhere or meet the qualifications under the designation regulation. So what is a seasonal tourist business? As Laura mentioned, she covered off. It does include roofed accommodations, as she mentioned, inns, guest houses, hotels, motels. We also include restaurants into that and camping establishments, but they must be closed for at least 4 months in the year, but it's not required to be consecutive. For example, if a property owner ends up closing every year, say at the end of October, and then they choose to reopen again December 1st to catch some business around the holidays, and then close again in January and remain closed for an additional 3 months. As long as they're closed for 4 months in total during the course of the year, they qualify. So who is eligible? So a restaurant, roofed accommodation, or camping establishment, just as we mentioned on the page before. And again, as we mentioned on the page before, and I'll apologize now for any duplication here, that the business has to be closed for at least 4 months in the tax year. And that you can see from this, the tax year runs from April 1st to March 31st, but for all intents and purposes, you could word it in the way I did in terms of a calendar year as well, although the program does run from April 1st to March 31st. It's operated, it's for any properties that are operated as restaurants, roofed accommodations, or camping establishments where the property owner or one of their immediate relatives, and as it says here, parent, sibling, child, grandchild, or spouse, is operating the business. And the property has to be 100% managed and owned by the property owner or their relative. In the case of a corporation, at least 50% of the voting shares must be held by the property owner or their relative. So the next question is, how do I apply? So it's really simple. All you have to do is fill out and sign the application form. PVSC every year sends these forms out to people who apply the following year and were either accepted, or we also send them out to the people where we receive them. But if we receive them late, we still send out a copy of the form the following year. And these forms must be completed every year by September 1st and sent to us by September 1st. And just to point out that PVSC, it is written in the legislation, PVSC does not have any jurisdiction whatsoever to extend that deadline or to accept any late applications. So as I mentioned, the forms are mailed out as a courtesy, and we do send them out to the people who applied the year before. But you can also get the forms by going to pvsc.ca, our website. And if you go into our website, you will find that there's a search bar up at the top right-hand corner. And all you have to do is type in the word seasonal, and it'll automatically bring you to this page that you see here, which is for the PVSC forms and guides. And this is where you can find the, as highlighted below at the bottom, the application for the seasonal tourist business designation. And if you need any help at all filling out the form, please feel free to call us or email us at inquiry@pvsc.ca. And one of the big questions we always get is, how do I know if I've been approved? And the easiest way for you to tell every year is when you get your assessment notice in January, it will identify it right on the notice. What I've shown you here is an excerpt from a typical property assessment notice. When you receive them, this is typically on the very first page, right in the center of the window of the page. And you can see it identifies what the assessed value is for the property, But in the area that I have highlighted below here in red, it indicates that the property is designated as a seasonal tourist business designated property, and also what amount of the value is applicable to the designation. And so here's just our contact information for any of you. I believe Lynn will be sending out a copy of this presentation afterwards, so that you have it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at any time. The phone number is, as it says, 1-800-380-7775. Email inquire@pbsc.ca. I will point out too, when you are making these applications, we do suggest that the best way for you to get the information to us is to take the document and scan it and email it to PBSC, to inquire@pbsc.ca. The best thing about doing that is when you do it that way, any emails that are sent to us, there is an automated bounce back. So you will receive a confirmation that we have received some sort of email from you. And also, if there's ever any question about whether or not it was received or received on time, you always have the ability to go back into your own emails and verify that it was in fact sent on time and to us. So that's always something that we strongly recommend to people whenever they're making their applications. So thank you very much. It was very brief, I realize, but we have plenty of time now to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, so there were a couple of questions that have been sent to us ahead of the presentation. So the first one is the 120-day business closure required to be consecutive days, or can it be spread out?
And as mentioned, the answer to that is yes, it can be spread out over the course of the year. It does not have to be consecutive. It just has to be 4 months in total.
Okay. And can you speak about the appeal process? What is involved if operators are looking to do that?
Certainly. So every year when you receive your assessment notice, if you turn it over, you will see there's a place on the back where you have the option to, if you wish to appeal, it asks you to fill out your contact information, your name, and the reasons for appeal. I would strongly again recommend that you put there clearly in your reasons for appeal if it's solely something like that you believed you were entitled to the seasonal business designation and did not get it. Make that the first thing on that you write down so it's very clear and easy. If you don't have a copy of the notice, just an FYI, say for example you're away or whatever the case may be and don't have a copy, you can also appeal by sending us a letter. You can scan it and email it to us if you wish, again at inquire@pbsc.ca. The important thing is that that letter, you just have to identify the property, the fact that you want to file an appeal, but make sure you sign the letter because we do require signatures on these forms in order to legally register with you.
Okay. And then the final one that I have is, I have more than one tourism business on my property, but only one is seasonal. Am I still eligible for the program?
Yes, you are. So what I would suggest in those cases, when you're making the application, if the building, say for example, if you have two separate structures on the property, if you can identify for us which structure is used for the seasonal business and which is not, or for example, if it's sections of a building, say for example, maybe the first floor is used for the seasonal business, or maybe it's half of the basement, something like that. Just as long as you can be clear to us what areas you are referencing, it'll be easier for us to calculate out what the designation would be and what the amount allocated to the seasonal business would be.
And then we have, is the closure only for short-term rental? What if there is a request for a mid-term rental for those needing housing? Does it count as a business or off the business?
So once something becomes residential, basically if it's rented on a monthly basis, then it ceases to be commercial valuation. So, and the seasonal business application only applies to properties that are taxable as commercial properties.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Marie? Okay, I'm going to assume it did. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so that's good for Marie. Okay. Wait and see if we have any others. And I'm not seeing anything come up. So yes, I will send a copy of the presentation out to everybody. And it does look like that's it for questions. So thank you very much for taking the time for this today. Great information and great in the presentation, so it'll be perfect for me to send out.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us, and we're very happy to help out at any time like this. So.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you and have a great day, everyone.
Okay, you too. Bye.